episodes. Will you recommend the Job Guide 360 interview guide to prospective job seekers?
Sure, I will. The guide is detailed and very comprehensive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look not just at a job, but really at a professional standard. Our source material. It's basically a full guide to the expectations for anyone stepping into, well, the very high-pressure world of forensic investigation. Think of it as an insider's view of the skills, the legal duties, the technical know-how needed.
Yeah, it's a great resource because it really frames the job, not just as like a technical task, but as this critical link, this bridge between science and the justice system. It's high stakes. So we're pulling out the absolute must-haves and must-knows, basically a shortcut to understanding how these pros work. From like tiny bits of evidence at a scene all the way to court testimony.
Exactly. Our mission here is to synthesize what really makes an elite forensic investigator tick. So let's start with the basics, the non-negotiables. If you had to boil it down, what are those absolute core skills you need just to get in the door?
Okay, right. You really need, I'd say, a trio of mental skills all working together. You've got attention to detail, analytical thinking, and pretty sophisticated problem solving. And look, this isn't just about being clever. It's about being incredibly precise, meticulous, even when things are stressful. That attention to detail, that's what stops you missing, say, a tiny fiber. Analytical thinking, that's how you figure out what that fiber means.
Yep.
And problem solving. Well, that's how you make a plan when the trail seems to disappear.
That makes a lot of sense. And they're not working alone, right? The materials also stress organization and communication skills. Big time. Why is communication so vital here?
Well, because all that amazing detailed work's kind of useless if you can't explain it clearly. To a detective, maybe, or a lawyer, or even a jury. An investigator has to translate what are often really complex scientific findings into language that's, clear, objective, easy to grasp. If you lose the jury, you can sink the whole case. Doesn't matter how solid your science actually is.
And then there's the environment itself. The job description, it specifically says you need to be comfortable in stressful, maybe even dangerous places. It's not always a nice, clean lab setting, is it? So what does remaining calm under pressure actually look like when you're at a potentially volatile scene?
It means doing your job methodically, precisely, even when everything around you feels chaotic. You have to know your safety protocols inside out, like when to wear protective gear, how to handle potential biohazards, when to step back and let law enforcement secure the area. And fundamentally, your number one priority always is collecting and preserving that evidence, because if you compromise the scene, maybe out of panic or just carelessness, you risk compromising the evidence itself. That chain of custody, it's the bedrock. If that breaks, the whole case can just fall apart.
Yeah, the chain of custody, crucial. Okay, so let's talk about where that analytical mind really comes into play. Once the evidence is safe, how do investigators demonstrate critical thinking? It's not just about finding the easy answer, right?
No, actually, it's kind of the opposite. It's about being professionally skeptical, you could say. Critical thinking here means you have to force yourself to consider every possible scenario, not just the obvious one. They need to analyze all the physical evidence they have, build a really comprehensive timeline, check documents, talk to witnesses, looking for any inconsistencies, any gaps. The sign of a truly great investigator, it's their ability to spot those gaps, those contradictions, and then come up with a hypothesis that actually fits all the pieces of data, even the weird ones that don't seem to fit.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit from the mindset to the more technical side of things. When an investigator first arrives at a crime scene, what's their process? How do they systematically start identifying evidence?
Right. Well, it's typically a phased approach, sort of like taking inventory. First, they identify and secure the physical stuff, weapons, tools, maybe phones or computers. At the same time, they're looking for and securing biological evidence, blood spatter, hair, fibers, any potential DNA traces.
And once they've got that inventory, the analysis begins. And this involves some pretty specialized gear, doesn't it? Can you give us a sense of the range of tools they need to master? This is where you really see that blend of old school science and cutting edge tech.
Oh, absolutely. For the traditional lab work, microscopes are key, obviously, but also things like spectrometers and chromatographs.
Yeah.
Think of a spectrometer as like a tool that helps figure out the chemical makeup of something unknown by seeing how it reacts to light. And a chromatograph, that separates complex mixtures into their individual parts. Super important for, say, toxicology reports or analyzing suspected drugs.
Wow, okay, so they almost need to be part chemist. But then, like you said, there's the tech side too. Digital forensics is huge now, right? Often it's the most critical part of a case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They absolutely have to be proficient with tools like Encase, FTK Imager, X-Ways Forensics, names like that. And these aren't just, standard software. They're highly specialized platforms for creating forensic copies, disk images, they're called, of digital devices, phones, hard drives, tablets. The main goal there is preservation, making sure the original data isn't touched while they carefully extract and analyze information. Could be related to cybercrime, IP theft, emails, texts, you name it. Without these tools, legally preserving data from a digital scene, which changes so fast, is basically impossible.
So an investigator has to be ready to switch, maybe from looking at a muddy footprint one minute to pulling encrypted data off a server the next. That's an incredible breadth of knowledge. Ballistics, handwriting, cyber stuff.
And connecting all of that, no matter what science they're using, is documentation. It has to be absolutely flawless. This is where that chain of custody really becomes concrete, Documentation means super detailed notes, meticulous photo logs, video logs of the scene, maybe using special lights like UV to find trace evidence you can't see normally. Every single item, every single sample has to be logged, its location mapped, and accounted for every step of the way.
That level of detail makes me wonder, what about stuff they collect that later on seems irrelevant to this specific case? You can't just bin it, can you?
No way, because in forensics, what seems irrelevant today might suddenly become critical later, or relevant to another case entirely. The procedure is really strict. Even irrelevant evidence must be documented properly: date, time, location, how it was found. Then it needs to be stored securely, based on what it is and its condition. Clearly labeled, detailed records kept. It's all about ensuring complete security and traceability. It's not just filing, it's like legally bulletproofing every action taken at that scene.
Okay, let's move into the really high-stakes area, dealing with people and the legal system itself. What about those tricky situations like when someone involved just refuses to cooperate, maybe won't provide personal info they need? What's the investigator's approach then?
Patience, persistence, and always operating within the law. First step is usually trying to figure out why they're refusing. Is it just privacy concerns? Are they scared? Do they just distrust authority? Once they have a sense of that, the investigator has to pivot straight to legal alternatives. That could mean going to court to get a search warrant, or maybe interviewing other witnesses who might have the information, or digging into public records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, that kind of thing. The key is knowing all the legal options and using them systematically. Coercion or illegal methods? Absolutely not. Never.
And that systematic legal approach has to carry right through to the courtroom, right? Investigators don't just find facts, they often have to present them as expert witnesses. How does their role change when they actually take the stand?
Yeah, it shifts fundamentally from discovery, finding things out, to communication, explaining things. They need to be really well versed in the legal process, understand how their specific piece of evidence fits into the bigger picture of the case, whether it's for the prosecution or the defense, and when they're presenting. They have to be accurate, totally objective, and this is crucial, persuasive. But persuasive through clarity and facts, not opinion. It means presenting just the facts, clearly, concisely, staying completely professional and calm, even under tough cross-examination.
That sounds incredibly challenging, especially when the subject matter itself is often, difficult or disturbing. Think about high-pressure situations like, say, attending an autopsy. How do they maintain that professional focus during something that must be visually and emotionally tough?
It's about compartmentalization, really. They have to keep their focus strictly on the forensic goal, figuring out the cause of death. During an autopsy, their job is very specific. Systematically collect tissue samples, take very precise forensic photos, write detailed notes about the body's condition, injuries, anything relevant. They kind of have to shift their perspective from seeing a person to analyzing physical evidence, making sure every finding is backed by science and documented properly for the medical examiner and the police.
And what happens if, during that process, something completely unexpected turns up? A finding that just wasn't anticipated from the initial information they had?
Right, a surprise. The absolute first priority is immediate, meticulous documentation. You take photos right away, write detailed notes about the new finding, collect any related evidence on the spot. Then, procedure dictates you report it immediately to the right. Authorities could be the coroner, the medical examiner, senior law enforcement. That way, any necessary parallel investigations based on this new info can start straight away. You can't just go off on your own tangent. You have to integrate that surprise back into the formal system.
Right.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to the management aspect. For investigators dealing with multiple complex cases, which must be common, how do they even begin to manage that workload?
Yeah, it's a constant juggling act. Organization and clarity are everything.
Probably the most critical strategy is prioritizing tasks, usually based on a mix of, urgency and importance. Which cases have court deadlines? Which evidence needs analysis right now? They rely a lot on tools too. Project management software, detailed task lists, digital calendars, anything to keep track of deadlines, evidence logs. What analysis is needed for which case?
And I imagine, given how demanding the work can be psychologically, that organization has to include managing themselves too, right? Not just the cases.
Oh, definitely. Collaboration is key. You can't work in a bubble. Sharing information, getting second opinions from colleagues, and just as important is recognizing when you need to step back. Take short breaks, maybe consult with a colleague if you feel stuck or overwhelmed. Burnout is a real risk, and so is losing objectivity. Keeping a clear head comes from being rested and focused, especially when you're up against tight deadlines.
That need for focus and clarity kind of leads us to the final set of requirements. Keeping their knowledge up to date. Technology changes so fast, especially in digital forensics. What does that commitment to perpetual learning actually involve in this field?
It's absolutely non-negotiable. Seriously, if you stop learning in this field, you become outdated very, very quickly. So it means things like attending specialized conferences, reading industry journals, keeping up with new research papers, also using online resources, webinars, maybe even podcasts like this one. Anything to stay current on new lab techniques, new encryption methods that criminals might be using, new tools for getting data off devices.
So let's say they encounter something totally new, like a custom-built encrypted device they've never seen before. They can't just give up, right?
No, they adapt and they research fast. The process usually involves reaching out to colleagues, maybe specialists in that specific area of digital forensics, doing rapid background research on the tech itself. Then they develop a careful step-by-step plan for how to approach the analysis. And like always, every single step of that research, that planning, that analysis at all has to be meticulously documented. So it can be reviewed by peers and stand up in court if needed.
Okay, so to round out this profile of the investigator, there's one more crucial piece, team dynamics and ethical considerations. Specifically, the material mentions how diversity on a team can actually be a strength in investigations. How does that work?
Yeah, this is a really important point. The source material frames diversity not just as, a social good, but as a genuine tactical advantage. For instance, think about an investigator who, maybe through their own background or experience, understands how certain communities might perceive law enforcement or how they might be disproportionately affected by the justice system. That kind of insight can help the whole team. Maybe it helps identify potential biases in how evidence was collected or challenges assumptions made during interviews. Ultimately, it can lead to a fairer, more thorough process for everyone involved. It's really key for good collaboration and actually solving the case effectively.
So when you pull all this together, the profile that emerges is, well, it's pretty remarkable, isn't it? The forensic investigator needs to be this blend of a super meticulous technician who knows their way around advanced lab gear and complex software, an empathetic communicator who can also be firm and strategic enough to get warrants, and a sharp legal mind who can present hard facts objectively, even when facing tough questions in court.
Absolutely. That whole list of skills required handling hazardous materials, navigating really stressful scenes, maintaining that unbreakable chain of custody for every single item, staying ahead of tech trends. It just shows this role demands constant learning, constant adaptation, and the ability to process huge amounts of information very quickly and accurately. The professional standard is incredibly high.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener, thinking about this field? We saw how investigators have to make tough calls, like when the evidence seems to point in two different directions at once and they have to pursue both leads fairly. And that brings up a really interesting final thought, building on that idea of judgment. If an investigator often has to rely on their professional judgment, their experience, their ethical compass to move a case forward, especially when absolute proof isn't there yet. Just how much personal weight and maybe even systemic weight does that individual investigator carry, especially when someone's freedom and the idea of justice itself really hangs in the balance based on their work? That's definitely something to think about, the profound responsibility that rests on their shoulders.